Eugene Bennett. I was born July the 26th, 1931 in Belleville, Ontario, and I lived in Point Anne, which is 3 miles outside of Belleville, and there's a cement plant there, and all the houses that were there belonged to the Canada Cement Company. The Canada Cement Company is now LaForge's.
Okay, what was your home life like?
Well, my grandfather and grandmother were strict Catholics. So we followed the teachings of the Catholic Church right down in Lent. During Lent, the icebox was in the pantry and it was locked during Lent. You got just what the Catholic Church prescribed. And it was, but the food, he had a small hobby farm. He had 2 cows, always had pigs and chickens, and he also worked at the Canada Cement.
What school did you go to?
Well, they have a real big school in Point Anne, and it was from primer right through to grade 8. When we played hockey in wintertime, every Saturday we would go up to Belleville and play against the rink, the rats they were called.
Rink rats.
No, rink rats, and they lived down in the wharf rats, And this one guy and I would just battle one another till you wouldn't believe some of the stuff. And he was a mean bugger, And when I went to high school, he was in the same form as me, and he said to me, "You're the little bugger that I had all the trouble with." So he thought the same thing about me, Oh, and it turned out he was a hell of a nice guy.
What kind of a student were you in school?
I was good. I could more or less print before I went to school. I would get the paper. You get down with a piece of paper, do the printing and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And this is our school there. In the first grade you were in, you used a slate, and you had soap sticks, to put the stuff down, and then and that's what you sometimes, if you're not smart enough or just not doing enough if they thought, that's what you got to do, clean the safes before you go home.
How far did you go in school?
I went to grade 9. I had to be grade 8 to get in the Navy at that time. And it was, and I went to 1 year to high school, it was pretty good. It was stuff. We did shop and a whole bunch of other stuff, architecture and it was pretty good. We had to go up to Belleville to go to high school, and there was no buses then. You had to pay, and that's the main thing that happened. My grandfather died, so kind of shook everything up, so we had to quit, go to work, and but I liked school.
Yeah.
Well, and I did 4 courses in the Navy, to get trade group 4, and I came first in every course.
So what was your favorite subject in school?
Math.
There you go. Yeah.
I was pretty good at it. Well, we had to learn the timetables then, so I still remember those,
Yeah.
That's what a lot of, when I worked in the maintenance office, my last posting, the planned maintenance office, guys were always sticking their head in there. Well, what is 9 times 9 number?
Did you have any siblings?
Yes, 1 brother. And he was a lot bigger than me, and my father was bigger too than the pair of us, and he was what you call a bad boy. I don't think he went to school very many days and he didn't get the strap.
When did you start playing hockey?
I think I was about 4. I got a pair of those sled type skates, and I think on the box that they came in it said 19 cents. And I used those for one season, But I was kind of small, and to get onto the rink, you had to reach up and get this slat just to get onto the rink, So I had to get someone to do that for me. Or if I couldn't find anybody, I'd have to slide, shoveling the snow off it and everything. I had to slide down one of those, crash onto the ice. I lived next door to Bobby Hall. And his father was the best hockey player. But when I got to be 16 years old, I played with him.
With Bobby Hall?
His father, Bobby was 9 years younger than me. But old Bobby, he was a pretty good hockey player. And I think he was big. He's bigger than Bobby too. Yeah, and you get out there on the ice, and you know what he'd say when he wanted the puck? Give her to me! Give her to me! And he was fun. But I got a picture of his oldest sister. There, she was a good. Her and I were in the same class, And I don't know how many times the principal caught her trying to kiss me.
When did you leave home?
I left in February the 26th, 1951. Before that, a couple of days before that, we had in Point Anne, they had this big building. It was really well built and it was real nice. Where in Point Anne, because of that big cement plant, they had that building to house single guys if they wanted to, and they could board there and get their meals there. But in that, they had a big pool room, and I got to be a pretty good pool player. And I was on a Sunday. We were allowed to play on Sunday. And I was saying I said, I think I'll hitchhike down to Kingston on Monday morning and join the Navy. And there's a bunch of guys there. I'll go with you. So 5 of us went down. And 5 of us, a cousin of mine, his name was Richard Bennett, and mine Robert. And we were the only 2 to get in. The other guys, one guy had color blindness and a bunch of other stuff So we went down, tried out, did the test they do, and him and I were the only 2 that passed. And we went down to Cornwallis on the 26th of February, 1951, and we got out of there in July. 19 weeks we were there.
Basic training.
Yeah. We looked like racehorses when we finished. You had to double wherever you went. I went across Canada on the coal burning train, and it took us 6 days and 5 nights to get out there, and it was terrible.
Where is this at?
In Esquimalt, BC. And to get there, to go by train, and these were cold burning trains, and you just the grit on you and there was no place to have a shower, we went into the station. They closed the places where the toilets were, and you had to wait until, or even into a siding, they locked them. And but we had berths, and that was good, like, and the meals, they'd come and get us, like my cousin and I went there. They would get us. We didn't get to order off the menu, but it was all government paid for.
Yeah.
And we went out there, and we 100 of us marched down to HMCS Ontario, which was a cruiser, and we went on board there, and we got detailed off for different jobs and everything. But we were there for a 100-man guard that was going to be required on this coast for the princess. She was a princess then, came over to Canada in September. It was the queen now, but she was just the princess then. And we had to come around. We went down through the Panama Canal and we stopped in a few places, and Acapulco, Mexico on the way back, of course. And we went there, and we picked her up in Charlottetown, and we went up the river. We stopped in Quebec City. Then we went up to Montreal, and we were there for a few days, and then we came back around and up to St. John's and dropped her off there, and then we went back to Acapulco, Panama, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and then to Esquimalt, BC. Yeah, the Queen lived on the ship. The captain's cabin was quite nice, like, and they had fixed it up a bit more. And her whole entourage came aboard, like, and they were quite good, like, but the first day we went into Charlottetown to pick her up, we had to mount this 100-man guard, right? And we had trained out in the Esquimalt before. We got up at 7 in the morning, and we went boat pulling and getting in shape and all that stuff. And we get there, and we were trained, pretty well trained. Just when he gave the order to present arms, to the officer of the guard, there was people all around, there was tugs and everything, blew their whistles and everything. We couldn't hear anything, but we were trained enough that it went through all right, like, And then to get back into the position to march off, it was okay, there was no noise at all. But,
What was your best memory in the military?
best memory of the military? Oh, gee, I've had so many. That I suppose when you get promoted to a chief petty officer, it'd be one of the highlights, because not very, quite a few people make it, but in the branch I was in, like, it was great, and I, even though I was a chief petty officer, I did the job of a chief, a C1 in 2 or 3 different positions. I was the coxswain on Annapolis as a petty officer first class, and it requires a chief petty officer first class. And the last job I had in the Navy, the guy that worked in the maintenance office, I took his place. He was a chief petty officer first class, and I was a chief petty officer second class. And I did the job as the maintenance coordinator. Even the first lieutenant had it on there. He said, "You know all about this stuff." He said, "Why should I have to bother?" He said, "You got it." So I got detailed off for another job. I used to send them messages, and I would talk with the engineer officer, and we'd put on the priorities of what we want done when we got back to Halifax. The cruisers had 3 turrets on them, and there was 3 barrels, 6-inch guns, and they were pretty well next to the cruisers, the battle wagons, like, and gee, it was great, like, But all these ships that I was on the first, like, you had to swing a hammock. And that was a chore and a half when you were half quit. Been to quite a number of ports. Apparently now the ships don't get a chance to go into the ports because near the end of the time I was in the Navy, when we'd go to some ports, there'd be people with placards saying, play your war games elsewhere. But I've been to New York a couple times. I've been to Tokyo and Singapore, Hong Kong, and matter of fact, going to Hong Kong, one time we hit one of those typhoons and Prittner tipped over. The only thing that saved us, the captain ran up to the bridge and he hollered when we were tipping over that full ahead port, full astern starboard, wheel hard to starboard, and he hollered that, and the only communications we had from the bridge to the wheelhouse was a voice pipe, and Leo Sampson, who was on the wheel at the time, heard the captain yell that, and before it came down through the voice pipe, he had put all that on, and we slowly went back. It was one of even running aground couldn't compare to the feeling I had that night when we almost tipped over.
What was it like?
What, on a ship?
In the Navy.
In the Navy? I loved every minute of it. I'd still be serving if they'd let me. No kidding, right? I thought it was, especially, you got promoted by what you did. And I was a petty officer in 5 years, and it was great, and then the first time they posted me on the ship as the chief bosun's mate. I was the guy that called the ship's company to attention in the morning, faced the mast, and they raised the flag, and then I would stand them at ease and call them to attention again and report them to the first lieutenant, and he would say, carry on with the day's work. So, and I stroll around, if I couldn't catch someone doing something wrong, I'd say, catch him and say, get a haircut. And no kidding, when I got out of the Navy, and the first time I went back to the Chiefs and PO's mess in Stadacona, we didn't have a beer, As soon as I walked through that door, there must have been 15 or 20 guys jump up and holler, get a haircut!
That's nice. Where did you meet your wife?
I knew her two women that she went to school with, and they both said, why don't you call Pauline? I said, oh yeah, she would go up with me like hell. And they said, you're always shooting yourself down that way. So they gave me her phone number and I phoned her, and she agreed to go out with me, and we were going to go down to mess. I went to get in my car and the thing wouldn't start. So that was one of the worst things. But I arrived in a taxi and I took her down to mess, and I went back to my place, and I woke up in the morning and there was a note on the coffee table saying, had a good time, call me sometime. So I did, and it was history after that.
When did you get married?
I got married in 1972. I have 2 children. A boy who was a marine geologist, and a girl who was a nurse. My favorite thing to do, duck hunting, and I like, of course, playing hockey, and baseball, softball. We even used to play football in the fall. It was tag football, you call it, a tag in your back pocket. The first horse I had, her name was Early Mary, and she was a standard bred, and the guy actually asked me if I'd take her, so I started off with her, and I got her bred to an Arabian from the farmer across down the next road, and we got a stud out of him. Well, it wasn't I got a male, and I had him neutered here, but it was fun to watch. All they have a personality all of their own, but he used to get up over here on the hill, and run down and jump over the little brook that's here and head up towards what used to be a big gate there. And he'd be going so fast, and I said, geez, he's going to run into the fence, but do you ever see them when they stopped? His bum couldn't have been any farther than off the ground when he'd stopped, But it was fun to see him do that. Got him trained and everything, and sold him to a woman that was going to use him properly, My kids never took the horses, so that's one of the reasons I got rid of them. Plus you have horses and kids, and you don't have enough money. I had one little fellow there when I was coaching hockey, and he had a stick and it was too long for him. He was up like this, and I said, hey, well, you got to cut your stick off there, I said, I'll bring a saw. He said, can't get my stick off, coach. He said, my big brother's got to use it too. Yeah, they always have an answer. Last coaching I did was a midget team, and I had one player there. He lived on the highway over to the rink, and he was a little bugger, and I could count on him to do anything I asked he would do. And I knew he was a little bug, and he liked boarding guys too, other thing. And I'd see who was the best player on their team, and I'd say to him, I want you on the ice when he's out there, and I want you to see that he doesn't score anything. And usually about halfway through the game, he'd come over and say, well, he's over there, coach, with his head between his legs. Do you think I should stop? Oh, he was one terror.
What did you do after you retired for the Navy?
Well, I was on unemployment, and I think we were the last few that were allowed to do it. And I had to go to every place. I had the card, and I had to go to every place. I didn't have to get them to sign it, but I had to write down where I was, And there was something in the paper that I saw one day, so I was for a correctional officer at the correctional center in Windsor. It was just normally the jail, but it had been renamed the correctional center. And I went to work there. They actually called me up on my birthday and said, come on over, we want to see you. After I'd been through an interview with all the councilmen and everything. And I went over there, and as soon as I walked through the door, a guy was standing there, he handed me the keys. He said, here, you're on duty. And whoops. I said, well, what do I do? He said, well, ask her. The matron was there. At that time, they had an apartment in the other side of the jail, and the people that ran the jail lived there. They had the man was the in charge of the jail, and the woman was the matron. They could keep one woman, or keep them locked up for move everything around. but we could keep up the 22 people, and it wasn't the best, but it was it helped, like, you know. And we kept all a certain type of prisoner too. And some of the things that happened while I was a correctional officer in the Hants County Correctional Center. This evening, the Mountie he didn't bring him in right away. He asked me if I would let the guy sleep in the place. It was about 30 below outside, like, you know. And he said, would you mind if I brought him in and not charge him or anything? I said, no, okay, bring him in. He said, another thing, he said he's got a dog with him. And he comes with this little Scotty dog. And I said, after the Mountie had left, I said, what's your dog's name? And he said, Jaws. And I said, well, Jaws, you can come and get in the cell with him. So I give him a pillow and a blanket and everything, and put him in there. And about, I guess 5:30 in the morning, I heard some scratching at the cell door. I went in, and Jaws wanted out, like, you know. I opened the door to the courtyard, like, you know, and there was a tree there. He went out and had a pee against the tree, come back in, and I put him back in and locked the door. and one morning I came in, and the matron said, I heard the inmates talking about you, Bob. I said, oh yeah, must have something nice. He said, they said, uh-oh, Bennett's come on today. We better get this place cleaned up, or you'll have us down on our hands and knees with our toothbrushes. I had all the inmates that came in there for a few years used to call the deck, the floor of the deck, and the bulkheads and everything else. When I worked at the correctional center in Windsor, the matron there, Mrs. Hunter, she was a great old lady, but I used to kid her a lot. And one day, one of my jobs was to go down to the store that you could rent movies, and every time I went down there, we had a number of Indian chaps in the jail at the time, and they always said when I left, like, you know, Bob, for God's sakes, will you try to get a movie where the Indians win the battle? And I always told the guy down there, and he was actually looking for one, like, you know. But anyway, Mrs. Hunter, I was always kidding her about something, and as I walked down to the store there, I noticed a phone booth outside the Fena station that used to be there. And when I got back to the correctional center, and I was talking to Mrs. Hunter, and I said, I passed the place where the Virgins of Windsor they're going to have their next annual meeting. She said, oh, well, where would that be? I said, in the phone booth down there by the Fena station. She said, oh, you sailors were all alike. You coming out here? The impact on my life would have to be, you know, the people I've met. Gee, I was on one of the ships with this Harold Crockett. He was operations chief, and Jack Milligan, same thing. Those guys, I'm telling you, they said I should have got the Order of Canada for going ashore with them. I figure for a long and successful life is just don't take yourself too serious. I think everybody says that. But then have a good woman. And the kids, just make sure your kids are well off.
I guess what I'm most proud of is being in the Navy and putting your life on the line for your country, and my kids, and gee, and the work I did in the correctional thing, even though it's pretty grim sometimes, like, you know, and a lot of laughs. Yeah, I regret that I never went far enough in school. Because if you work hard in service, they recognize who you are, and I can show you something on my record there. One officer said, if you had got one more superior recommend, you could have became an officer. And I said, no, never told me that. He said, maybe they were afraid, he said.
But you can't win everything all the time. You got to take the bitter with the sweet. But it's been a great life. I don't regret one thing.